Right, I'm very excited to be in Harley Mormon's exhibition, Let's Do the Time Warp Again, with Harley, to be able to kind of show you around and allow everybody to see the really wonderful works that are in this exhibition and how they really all come together in this wonderful space. So the exhibition takes on a lot of pretty big themes. The exhibition is about time. It's about queerness. It's about being trans. It's about binaries. It's about breaking down binaries. It's about nostalgia. So there's really a lot of kind of big ideas sort of swirling around this exhibition. So just to start us out, Harley is going to talk to us about the first case that you see in the exhibition.
So this case is called Mirage, and Mirage is actually the name of the kind of optical illusion toy in the center that looks like a big black UFO. And it's something that I remember from my parents' house as being something that I was never allowed to touch because it, I think, was very expensive. But what it does, it's a pair of concave mirrors, and inside, if you place an object, it looks like it's floating on top of the surface. So depending on what angle you're shooting it from, it might look like there's a rainbow floating on there. So in this case, there are also a whole bunch of erasers and mirrors, and all the erasers are from my childhood eraser collection. I started amassing erasers when I was in probably grade 1. And most of the erasers that are in this show were actually given to me by my mom as bribes, basically, to do schoolwork and not complain about it, and to like do well on schoolwork, essentially. So we made a deal that whenever I got a 100% on an assignment, she would give me like a little sticker or a tiny sticker, or for every number, I would she gamified it basically. And so all of these erasers are from like the mid to late 1980s, and I kept them. I'm a keeper.
Right, so from Mirage, I'd like to bring us to this scoreboard that's behind me here. One of the things that Harley a couple of times has mentioned in our conversations in putting together this exhibition is this sense of competitiveness. And so I think there's something interesting that maybe Harley's mom was sort of trying to capitalize on in the eraser bribes. And he's described several times that he has this kind of like internal competitiveness, and not really for anything in particular, but perhaps with one's own achievement or success or things like that. And so I think that the scoreboard is super interesting. It's a very bizarre scoreboard. We're not quite sure what it's tracking. And so Harley, maybe you could just share with us a little bit about this work.
So this work is called Scorekeeper, and really it was meant to, on purpose, be extremely ambiguous. So you notice in the reflection that's being shot right now, you can see me, and the text on the scoreboard is facing the right side. You can read it, and the clock looks relatively normal. Looking at it from the right direction, you'll notice that everything on the scoreboard, including the clock, is backwards. So the clock runs backwards, and the numbers on the scoreboard are lenticular and will switch as you direct your vision toward one mirror or another. They kind of gradually shift between 0 and 1. And I liked the idea that it would be extremely ambiguous and kind of overtly decorative. So scoreboards usually keep track of sports, but there aren't very many sports or sporty things in this exhibition. In fact, I am really almost the world's most unsporty person, as I was in junior high. But I loved the idea of something very visible kind of looming over you as you moved through the gallery and looked at things. And as for what it's tracking, it could be tracking you competing against yourself or against some sort of imaginary other, or anything at all, or nothing.
So one of the things that I think is particularly interesting or clever in Harley's work and in this entire exhibition is that he's offering us several binaries, literal, like computer binary, zeros and ones, to completely absurd. And so he sets up these binaries just to kind of dissolve them and break them down or kind of highlight their ridiculousness. And so there's a lot in this show. Stickers and erasers are set up as a binary, young and old. And so one of the sort of main features and kind of the main works in this exhibition are this series of grade school portraits that Harley has made of more institutional school portraits that he had taken from grade 5 to grade 12 with some deviation. And then they are paired in lenticulars with contemporary portraits of himself. And so when you're walking around them, they are kind of blurring and blending back and forth between Harley now and his younger self. And so, Harley, did you want to maybe talk us through this work, what it means for you and what you're trying to convey here?
So, like Lindsay said, in all of these works, contemporary portraits of me taken last January by a photographer in Lethbridge, Angeline Simon, are juxtaposed against institutional portraits that were taken in school in all but 2 important cases. So going from grade 5 to grade 12, you can, number one, you can gradually see what I looked like getting older, and you can see me like through my awkward, like acne-filled teen years and into a slightly more confident, but still really awkward, like older teenager. And what I was thinking of, because all of the contemporary photos were taken at the same time, and they're layered in different ways on the photo, like with their paired photos. In some of them, I'm obviously, or in some of the photos, it looks as though I'm interacting in some way with my younger self, maybe standing side by side or looking at. In other photos, our faces are almost exactly paired, so it's difficult to tell which feature is coming from which portrait. And for example, in the grade 5 portrait, it really looks like there's a young girl with some sort of amazing beard, and I love it. And that, like, they change and different features become visible, but it's quite difficult in the ones where my face is overlaid to pick out exactly what is coming from which portrait. When I was doing this work, I was really thinking of, okay, well, it's kind of a thing for people when they're thinking about formally transitioning, to think a lot about like former incarnations or versions of themselves, even if they don't think about it in that terms, like thinking about their childhood. It's almost a cultural demand that we make of trans people to think about and like reconcile themselves with anything that might have been signs or trends, or that somehow proves that they really are trans. That's clearly ridiculous, but I did it anyway. It's a bit of a stereotype, and I'm happy to fall into it. But as I went through my enormous archive of not only erasers and stickers, but paperwork from my childhood, and I looked at all these photos, and I thought, these photos all very much still look like me, and they feel kind of like me, although I look very different. And I noticed that a lot of the clothing that I was wearing would still be very much what I would pick now. My style really hasn't changed that much since grade 8. Unfortunately, I don't know if that's terrible. Anyway, so when I was pairing them, I tried to kind of match the younger institutional portraits in terms of color and general affect, like the kind of expression I was making, or the kind of thing that I remember feeling. So one of the works that I love to tell the story of, because it was kind of important in my thinking about this, is actually the story about grade 11. Because grade 11 was one of the 2 years that I did not have a school portrait taken, but I do have a portrait that was taken on the day. So in grade 11, I was kind of a surly kid, and I wore to school on purpose, I dressed up for portrait day, a blue t-shirt that said, "This is what a feminist looks like." And I put a rainbow button on my pants and a few other pieces of rainbow jewelry. And I dyed my hair purple with Kool-Aid. It was Diet Kool-Aid. That was not a good idea. And I thought, okay, I'm ready to have my picture taken. But when I got to school, the photographer did not think I looked presentable enough to have my picture taken. And so they declined and told me to come back later, but I wasn't able to. And so when I got home, I drove home and totally incensed and in a fit of huffiness, made my mom take my portrait on picture day, sort of standing in front of my car, looking upset. And I kept it because it is in fact a record of what I looked like and felt like a lot in grade 11. And so when I recreated sort of recreated the shot, I'm standing on a track beside my tricycle, which is the modern equivalent of my car. So in grade 12, the portrait is also a little bit different. In grade 12, where I'm from in Minnesota, it's traditional for all high school seniors to have their portrait taken not at school, but to seek out an independent photographer and go for a photo shoot. And these are the photos that are used in the yearbook. So instead of wearing a gown with the rose or any other local convention, everyone has these portraits that are intended to ideally reflect the personality of the person somehow. And I was really owly about having to do this photo shoot because I hated the way I looked, and I didn't like the idea of being shot in weird soft focus, the way so many portraits of other girls in my class were being done. But eventually I kind of negotiated something with my parents and the photographer that I felt reasonably good at. So here you see me twice, kind of reclining on my arm. And in grade 12, it was fall, and I'm wearing a green sweater, and you can see I'm wearing a little rainbow necklace, kind of similarly to grade 11. Yeah. it was my tiny, basically invisible way of trying to assert myself.
So one of the things that I think is really interesting with the school portraits and this entire exhibition is that it's kind of this practice of knowing oneself. And there is a certain element of care for oneself at all ages throughout your life, sort of, looking back to high school and kind of giving care to those younger versions of yourself. But this idea of do we change, how we change, and kind of those sort of larger questions that I think are really interesting to think about when looking at this exhibition, and sort of how we change over time. And so time is definitely showing up a lot. And on this entire wall, there are all of these different clocks and mirrors. And so maybe you could just share with us a little bit about the clocks, your interest in time, and kind of what this wall is all about.
Okay. Well, in contrast to the school portraits, which are on the wall across from us, that are very much about simultaneously holding the past and present at the same time and trying to reconcile those two. The clocks on this wall, they're quite playful, and some of them don't really know what they're doing. So the clocks on this wall are all based more or less on stickers that I received from school, so in elementary school. The stickers are mostly based on stickers that were either given as kind of reward stickers or stickers that were somehow institutional. So Super Student right here is from a set of stickers that was given out as part of the Scholastic Book Fair. So at the center of this wall, there is this large 4.5 foot in diameter clock with lenticulars at the points, the 12, the 3, the 6, and the 9. And all the lenticulars on this wall, they are based on stickers, but also their eyes. So they're the eyes of someone, and something is watching you. So all this work was made during the pandemic, and it was incredibly influential on everything in the show. So when I was thinking about time and thinking about how it felt like, not only was I going through kind of in a time of emotional kind of repeating and continually revisiting that you can kind of see in the portrait series that's on the opposite wall. But at the same time, it felt like I was really kind of stuck. For me, it definitely felt like, because there weren't the holidays or the different days that one can use to mark time, they just weren't happening. And I lived by myself. So it was like the passing of a day or an hour got muddled, and my sense of time started to become just influenced and different than it normally would be. And so in the show, clocks are doing a lot of kind of both conceptual and physical work. Everything on this wall is the end result of kind of playful experimentation with the materials I was working with. So with stickers and erasers, but also with the clock motors. And I loved the idea of using what is actually a quite simple motor on a domestic scale, kind of as a craft material. Because as you can see, all these works are clearly handmade. They are not, they weren't professionally made. They're not institutional. They're very provisional. They're kind of like glue gun together and made out of the stuff that one would or might have in their house already. And in that, it's fair to mention that lenticulars aren't generally a material that individuals work with. Lenticulars get used a lot for all kinds of things, but generally by institutions for things like children's toys, and a lot of novelties are produced with lenticular film, but they're not generally something that individuals would produce because the tolerances are so small that in making them, it's just really difficult to get correct. So hence the working with those mistakes is part of working with the mistakes in alignment is a big part of the portrait series and also the series on this wall. So I was playing around with what I could do with lenticulars and what I could come up with. These works have been very process-based, and that's a different way of working for me. A lot of things about the show are both playful and just silly, and I think never change is one of them. I like the phrase never change because it reminds me of something that people actually did write in my yearbook when I was in grade 11 and 12. And it seems like the kind of extremely surfacey, surface level thing to say that seems supportive, but it's actually like kind of a curse, because who wouldn't want to change throughout their life? And I think I kind of get the sentiment behind it, but at the same time, it's both very good and very bad. So two things in the show are called never change. I use the phrase never change to refer it to the portraits series as a group. And clearly they change. They change all over. They can't stop. And also, this phrase looks like a lenticular, but doesn't actually change at all. It doesn't move. There's no dual image behind it, and it does not have the capacity to change.
So there are a lot of playful sort of elements and jokes and some things that are quite kind of whimsical in the show that Harley's put in. One of the things that I wanted to draw attention to was this little interventions that Harley has done throughout the show. There are these kind of little cutout mirrored bits throughout the show. But this one that kind of draws attention to the labels and sort of like points a finger to the kind of like infrastructure of exhibitions, I think is particularly clever and funny for me. And it's also mirrored. There are lots of mirrored elements. And so maybe Harley, just to kind of finish us off, will share a little bit about his use of mirrors.
So around the space, there are all sorts of small plexiglass mirrors. And I love mirrors for lots of reasons. They add sparkliness. And I love the way they kind of erratically can reflect light. But also, I like the idea that they're inviting you to look into them. And when you look at a mirror, you're seeing yourself and the things that are behind you. Like with Scorekeeper, you can see what's behind you. And I'm really using mirrors as a metaphor for the retrospective glance.